It's the Smart Driving Cars podcast. Glad you're spending some time with us. Promise we'll make it worthwhile. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alan Kornhauser. Hi again, Alan.
Hey, good morning, Fred.
Good morning, and we are delighted to have with us for this edition a great journalist, TechCrunch senior transportation reporter and editor, Kirsten Korosek. She's a podcaster too with Autonocast. Thanks for joining in, Kirsten.
Thanks for having me.
Really wonderful to have you, Kirsten. You do a fantastic job out there reporting on all this, and thank you for joining with us. We're blessed here.
And we're going to start out, Kirsten, with a couple of headlines from some stories that you've worked on over the last week or so. Tesla's Cybertruck is facing some competition, especially with Rivian's latest announcement.
Right. Well, that's an interesting one. I'm very excited actually to see and test drive the Rivian because I feel like I've been waiting for it for a long time. And there's a lot of really interesting design cues in the vehicle, but also they're really pushing the advanced driver assistance systems in their vehicle. Really kind of, I hate to use the term level 2 plus, but it's really designed to be a more robust system than pretty much any other vehicle on the market. I would put it in the same category of Tesla and GM Super Cruise, but unlike Tesla, it has a driver monitoring system, and it has more cameras and 360-degree radar, which Tesla vehicles don't have. So I'm really interested to see that piece, of course, because I'm so focused on automated vehicle technology. But on the electrification side, really curious to see what buyers go for. Are they going to go for a more modern take on the pickup truck, but still palpable to the consumer, or are they going to go for the dystopian vision of the Cybertruck? We'll see.
Well, he's changing that design too, right? So we don't exactly know what the form factor is going to be here.
Right.
Yeah, well, I think what I'm taking from it, and again, this is from a distance, you're much closer to it than I am, is I think this is the real value of the, as you called it, level 2 plus. I hate the SAE levels, blah blah blah, but I think I think that this is really driver assistance for the professional driver who so desperately needs some help. I mean, somebody that's out there driving and driving a truck, and I'm assuming that all this is going to go into the Rivian, vans that deliver, blah, blah, blah. It's really to support the professional driver and make that his or her them much safer, make their job somewhat, more acceptable. I mean, it's tough driving out there all day long and trying to feed your family while, keeping the vehicle between two white lines and so on. And I think that's the fundamental value here. And I think that's really what they're driving to do, or at least that's what I also get from your comments on it. How do you take that?
Yeah, I mean, you make an interesting point about Amazon. So, they've been working on the pickup truck and the R1S, which is
right.
the SUV and all of those are going to be coming to market, deliveries starting in midsummer next year. At the same time, of course, also designing and building these vans for Amazon. We've seen some looks at them now.
Mm-hmm.
But the driver assistance piece is going to be really interesting and important, I think, for Amazon. Now, I don't know definitively if that tech will be in the Amazon vehicles, but my assumption is that it will. And things like adaptive cruise is important, but fleet monitoring, so having a DMS system in the vehicle is going to be really critically important. And we know it's critically important because also in the news today or this week was Ford's revealing of the E-Transit van, and that is absolutely they are pushing the digital services and the fleet monitoring and management system as much as they are the electrification. So we know that's important for, and really kind of like of the value proposition, if you will, for these companies to push and hopefully get customers on the commercial side, is that fleet management and ADAS piece.
Right, and with that, you know, if you're dealing with fleets have all these employees out there. I mean, whether or not they're gig or not gig, they're really employees that they really do care about, and they really do want them to be able to feed their families and not die out there on the roadways while they're trying to do it, and to have a workplace that is a little bit easier to deal with than, you know, sitting there driving all damn day long. I mean, I see that as the real value proposition. And then again, you're managing this fleet in real time. You're trying to basically do delivery services in real time. So that communications piece, that assistance piece, to make sure they don't need to be on here, but in fact, some of that information is going directly into the whole operational structure of the use of those vehicles. I mean, I think it's brilliant by both Ford, as you point out, and for Rivian to do that. I think it's very important.
Couple of things I wanted you to comment on too, Kirsten.
Okay.
The differences between what Rivian calls hands-free driver assistance and Tesla calling, you know, fully driverless. Tell us what the differences are. What do we know? Also wanted to ask you about the range on the Ford vehicle. Is what, 100 some miles? Is that a drawback?
Yeah, so I'll jump on the Rivian stuff first. So what Rivian is putting out there, and again, this is a vehicle that doesn't exist in the marketplace yet, so we'll see how it is functioning once I get my hands on it. But we're talking about 360 radar, 360 cameras, 12 ultrasonic sensors, a hands-free driving system. So in the beginning on specific highways, so it's going to be geofenced in a way. The operational design domain is not going to be like Tesla wherever. So,
which Tesla it is, why it said forever, it is not forever. I mean, specifying the operational design domain is critically important in any of these discussions. Go. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is going to be, you know, implemented in the beginning on highways, and this is very similar to what GM did with Super Cruise. The difference is that Rivian is making this standard on all of its vehicles, and so it's not going to be some upgrade. And unlike GM, which, you know, rolled it out into one vehicle initially, you know, this is going to be on their first two vehicles, and the presumption is on all of theirs. They don't have LiDAR in the vehicles, and it's unclear if they would add that, but my understanding is that the intent is to eventually, through over-the-air software updates, go to what SAE designates as level 3. Now, I have, you know, there's some concerns there. Let's see what happens. You know, they don't even have a car on the road yet. The difference between what Tesla has and what Rivian is going to have, which is called Driver Plus, is besides the hardware differences, Tesla has autopilot, which is now standard in its vehicles, and that's the adaptive cruise and some of the basic ADAS, still pretty high functioning and pretty easy to use. What they call full self-driving, which is that upgrade of, what is it now? It's more than $8,000.
I think it's 10.
Yeah, $10,000.
Maybe,
now.
who knows? I mean, the price moves around, whatever.
Yeah.
Who knows what the hell they ever charge you? I don't know.
Yeah. So $10,000 now, and that is meant to. It doesn't have LiDAR. It doesn't have 360 radar, and it's the same. It's essentially the same, very close to the same hardware system, but what they're offering there for that upgrade is what they dub as self-driving, which is not on city streets. So it's recognizing stop signs and traffic lights. The system is claims to, and to be able to, when you click on navigate on autopilot, basically navigate you from point A to point B. Now, driver has to be in the loop at all times. It's a little bit like driving with a teenager. It makes mistakes. It's right now the beta mode is not exactly high functioning. And the big criticism, of course, is that there is no cabin facing camera or driver monitoring system that even ensures that the driver is paying attention. And we've seen plenty of videos of the abuse of that system. So, those are the big differentiators in my mind. I mean, I don't know. Have you tried?
Well, Musk has touted the computers and the coding that'll go into them, what exists now and what will go in. So is that a big differentiator?
Well, we know that the Rivian has two compute platforms, redundant compute platforms. There isn't a lot more that we know. I mean, Tesla very much touts its like internally made chip. This is something they've been working on for a really long time, and it's not a departure for Tesla because they've become more and more vertically integrated as they've gone on. I mean, that's not surprising, but there are others out there that have been building chips as well. So, I can't answer that like because I don't have a deep knowledge of the tech that Rivian
The differences between the
on.
two, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that'd be a proprietary probably conversation that unfortunately no one has ever shared with me. But within the industry, I know that there's some skepticism that the chip that Tesla has can actually handle the types of functions that are necessary to be able to do what would really be considered full self-driving. Not to mention the fact that the suite of sensors they have doesn't seem to be able to even it's not complete in a way that you would need, I think, to really push the driver assistance to more of a autonomous driving sort of capability.
my sort of view on these things, again, taking somewhat of an academic view, because what the hell, I guess I'm an academic. That's the best thing I can. I guess I am an academic. That
It's okay.
I'm by definition an academic, but my key on these things is that as soon as the provider of the code and the hardware and so on is willing to accept all the liability associated with anything that goes bad with it while it's being used, then that thing can drive. Before that, if I'm gonna be responsible for it, I've got to be in the loop. And if I'm in the loop, that's not even, I call self-drive. That's not automated driving. If I have to sit there and watch it, okay?
Right.
And if Elon isn't willing to say, hey, what I have out there, if anything goes bad, it's on me. Bring it to me. No deductible. I take care of it. Don't worry. As soon as he's willing to say that, then I think we can talk about whether or not this thing will really do the things that it's supposed to do.
Because that's a great way to boil it down.
I mean, to me, that boils it down.
Oh,
because in some sense, that's what Waymo, I think, has done, at least within the operational design domain that they've specified and wherever they're operating. They're out there, they're saying, hey, it's on us. We can't point to the dog ate my homework, or we checked off this box as some who knows what overviewer, and said, hey, we did that. It's your problem now. I mean, they're out there. I think that's what they're saying. And to me, that's the fundamental difference. This SAE, blah, 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 and this level 3. I mean, level 3 doesn't happen until I can literally sit there on my phone, and if anything bad happens, then it's their responsibility. But if it's going to be mine, then I'm going to be sit there watching over that teenager, damn it, ready to grab the wheel. Talk to me here.
Yeah, I think there are maybe a couple of automakers that have said in the past that they would take liability. Volvo springs to mind.
Yeah.
You can fact check me on that one.
Yes, I think you're right. They're gonna. They didn't. They haven't. It's all a gonna, not haven't.
They've committed to doing that. Tesla has not, and and you're right. Actually, my co-host at the Autonocast, Alex Roy, whom I believe you know,
We love
do.
Alex.
Yeah.
Who doesn't loveAlex, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean, he's
you
a
know, whatever.
character.
Yeah,
He is a character. But
yeah,
he has said, that's
yeah,
been his.
yeah.
You two are in agreement on this. Is that he has often said until the driver can be completely out of the loop, and also the automaker or the manufacturer or the
Or
operator takes full
whomever. Yeah,
responsibility. Until then, until those two things happen, is just not self-driving. And I think that Tesla's big. They wanted to be a bit audacious. They love playing with words and, double entendres and, putting pop culture references within their vehicles. Like, you can turn the volume up to 11 and all that, which is a reference to Spaceballs. Um, they pushed it though with autopilot and FSD. And, we've already seen how Europe has responded to that. Right. So
yeah.
I think it's a little horrifying, but also kind of fascinating as a journalist to see what's going to happen with over the next year as that beta capabilities increase, and also as more and more people have their hands on the Tesla full self-driving. The important thing to remember before I answer your question from a while ago about the Ford is that there is a financial stake here for Tesla. They cannot recognize all the revenue that they get from those $10,000 upgrades until it is actually, they can fully say that it is capable. So what happens is as they release capabilities, they can release some of that revenue or recognize it on their balance sheet. And so there is a motivation to, and that's where I think sometimes can be dangerous, is that there's a motivation potentially, they've never said this, but to release it maybe then it's earlier than it's should be released. So that's something to always keep in mind. There's always that other piece out there. There is a financial motivation to release some of this maybe before it's ready.
And on that Ford range.
Yeah. Okay. So Ford E-Transit. So I looked at the spec sheets yesterday, and I talked to the folks at Ford a bit about this, and the highest range right now, they say more is coming, is 126 miles for their low roof, sort of just their most popular version of their cargo van that's electrified. And then it goes all the way down to 108 miles on this like extended cab. So that sounds like a very low number. And it is. Their contention is that they looked at, they've got like 40% market share, they claim, in North America for commercial combustion engine cargo vans. They said that they looked at all of the telematics data and also talked to some of their global customers, and that the average mileage a day for drivers was 74 miles. So you could argue that 126 is plenty, and their whole basis of that is that their customers are more price sensitive than range sensitive. The big thing, of course, is that then you're charging that commercial van every single night, so your battery better be in tip-top shape in terms of being able to charge or go through the cycle more frequently. But yeah, I don't know. What do you? I'm curious.
I think
it's enough.
I tend to agree with them. Okay, because at least in my previous life, I also had a company. We did a lot of work in truck logistics. Looked at a lot of data from trucking companies at both local delivery as well as long hauls in terms of trip length distributions. It's not really the average that matters all that much, because the distribution is not, it's not some sort of normal distribution. It has, it has big shape to it. But if you put the information system on top of it and you're managing the fleet, then you actually know how much you're going to need when you load up the vehicle with whatever jobs that the vehicle happens to have to do. So within that management environment, if you happen to have a distribution of vehicles, then you have plenty of work that you need to do that is doable within that range environment. And substantially more than 50%, in large bulk, and relatively few that you need a long haul. So therefore, in terms of then managing your operation, for which there are lots of folks, if they don't want, I'll give them the software to do it, whatever. You have management software on top of that can sit there and basically know that in fact you can operate within those range limits, and bring the vehicles back in and charge them and do not burdensome management, but active management on top of it, such that you can run your business very, very well without having to carry around a big battery out there that is, so when you do the ROIs on these darn things, you see, my goodness, this is a good sweet spot. Now, for a consumer, it's not, because holy hell, we have to go visit grandmother who lives,
well, it's not
only
just that,
28 miles, but we think
Right.
that she's 400 and whatever miles, and we've got to have my goodness, and never mind.
Well, a lot of people, Alan, would want to convert these vehicles and have with the gasoline versions into RVs. But they're not going to do it with 100-some-mile range. Let's put it.
Yeah, well, sure, but I don't think that.
Van life, right, Fred?
Yeah, we're talking about vans and
Exactly.
and probably I would suspect that Ford with the vans is much more interested in the fleet and the commercial business on this thing. And in fact, if that's really what, if you want to do it for the consumers, then you pile it up, and then you sweet talk them to spend a whole lot of money and go into enormous debt and blah 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 blah, which maybe you can't do with a fleet purchaser or a buyer that actually knows what the hell. Never mind, we won't go down those roads.
Well, we have a couple of other delivery vehicle headlines that we want to touch on real quick. One being GM Cruise partnering with Walmart, testing out autonomous grocery delivery in Arizona, of course.
Yep.
And there will be human safety drivers. And the other is the Neuro story. The valuation
What
that
do
they
you want to talk
hit.
about
Yeah.
first?
Yeah.
Your choice.
Well,
you
touch-
go.
Touch on them both for us. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's do Cruise.
Yeah.
'Cause that's an interesting company to me. So Cruise is always. I had to go back when they made this announcement, because I've been writing about AVs for a long time now, and they've actually had like a small fleet in Scottsdale testing for years. They've never removed those vehicles. It just doesn't get a lot of attention because the company has been so public and forceful really about how their intention is to deploy robotaxis in San Francisco. The end. But they've absolutely maintained a little test fleet in Scottsdale. So the deal with Walmart is basically a human driver behind the wheel, as you mentioned, in Scottsdale. So that's a suburb of Phoenix, pretty large, and it's going to be doing customer deliveries. And Walmart has, I think, partnered literally with like every AV company out there now, which makes sense. And Walmart reminds me of a legacy automaker. A lot of people don't realize this, but when partnerships are announced, that word has varying meaning depending. You just don't know what the terms are necessarily. It could be a memorandum of understanding agreeing to work together. It could be a very limited pilot. It could be a proof of concept. We don't necessarily know every single time a company says partnership what that means. And automakers do this, and Walmart's starting to do this. So they've partnered with, let's see, at least 3 or 4 other companies to see what the world would be like with autonomous delivery. And I think they're figuring out the logistics and delivery piece because it's becoming increasingly important, especially with COVID-19 and consumer habits changing. For Cruise, the interesting thing is that all of a sudden it's like, oh, are they getting into delivery? I think that they're always going to keep that door open, and that doesn't mean that they're going to pivot, but they've been kind of delivering as, a way to test a little bit, and that's gotten some criticism in San Francisco with the food banks during COVID. They've made something like 125,000 deliveries. So I think both companies are in that research and learning mode. It's not anything to I would be a little surprised if it became this like massive commercial partnership. You know, I think it will be something that lasts for a year and maybe it will build into something else, but you know, it wouldn't shock me for it to end either. I mean, these types of partnerships happen all the time.
I guess, the way I look at it is that, of course, these companies are interested in this. I mean, it is a whole heck of a lot easier to provide mobility to a bunch of packages out of a Walmart than it is to move me around. I'm nothing but a pain in the butt, and of course, and if anything should go wrong, so we get one hand a little spilled milk, and on the other hand, who knows what lawsuit,
Right.
and so of course, and if one then looks at Amazon, who goes out there and gets Zooks on a nickel, and is out there with Rivian, and they've got to be doing this. And if all of a sudden, Amazon can deliver from their delivery place, their in outside here near the New Jersey Turnpike to my house between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. with a driverless vehicle that basically costs them nothing. I mean, they get the zero. I mean, the whole thing of Amazon is they charge me zero to deliver something here. If on their balance sheet it comes out to almost be zero, that's a whole chunk of money that's up here drops to the bottom line. And of course, Amazon or Walmart's out there looking at Amazon saying, my goodness, we've got to do this. If we want to beat Amazon, this is how we beat them. Or at least one of the, what do you think about that? Huh?
Yeah, I mean, Walmart has the money to play around and experiment with different things. And one of their more interesting partnerships, I think actually that when you really look at it makes the most sense, is the one that they have with Gatik, which is just a small startup that came out of stealth probably about 2 years ago, I want to say. And they have these autonomous refrigerator trucks, right? These box trucks. What they're doing is they're not delivering to the customer. They're delivering from the big distribution center to the neighborhood Walmart store. Instead of having the big semi trucks that were doing that, now you've got these box trucks and they can do more frequent trips. So they're doing this in and around, where Walmart's headquartered. And, I haven't checked up on them lately, but that's an interesting concept because you are really removing the consumer from it. You're not even having to deal with the missed delivery piece. It's literally just, let's stop using semi trucks that are driven by people and instead do the automated trucks between the distribution center and, 3 or 4 Walmarts within a 20-mile area or whatever. And Walmart has, of course, the number of retail bricks and mortar stores to be able to pull that off. So I think that's pretty interesting.
And it's all related too, Kirsten, to Neuro's valuation story, which we mentioned too.
Oh, how so?
Well, I mean, the value of a company coming in at what are they saying? It hit a $5 billion valuation, and their business is going to be, I suppose, these autonomous deliveries. Pretty much, right?
Right. So, delivery is so hot right now. We like to joke about that because of COVID. But I think that it's important to think about delivery not as just one giant subject matter, right? There's the little bots that are on the sidewalk. There are the what Walmart and Amazon are kind of playing around with, and then Neuro's kind of in the middle. And Neuro is a very interesting company. They did just raise, I think it was 500 million, which I believe that puts their post-money valuation at 5 billion. And they're interesting because their whole vehicle could never fit a human being in it. It's designed just for delivery, but it's not a sidewalk bot. And sidewalk bots are kind of interesting and a little bit problematic because of issues that can come up with the sidewalk itself or obstructing pedestrians and even people with disabilities there's lots of videos out there of like a sidewalk bot like getting in the way with someone using a wheelchair. Neuro is on the road and they've got some really interesting tech, and I personally think that the most interesting thing about Neuro is the fact that they licensed their technology to Ike. Ike kind of really, in a way, was born out of Neuro. And so to me, they, in a way, have two businesses potentially. They've got the delivery business, but I'm curious to see if they license their tech to anyone else in the future. I don't, maybe they will.
Well, we'll continue in just a moment, but this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The symbol is MOTO. You can get more info at motoetf.com. On the site, check out the white paper. It's called the Smart Transportation Revolution. It's under a tab called Insights and News. Some great information there to help you make informed decisions. You may know ETFs can be a smart way to spread risk with investments and focus on a particular category of stocks. The site, once again, is motoetf.com.
Fred, let me jump in. Kirsten started a line of discussion having to do with operating versus licensing. How do you see that evolving here? Where I've been in the past on this thing, I've looked at, if you can get this to work, this is a goose that's laying a golden egg. And you'll go out there, and the only way you're going to sell this goose is if somebody doesn't pay you for the goose, it pays you for the golden eggs that it's laying. And so therefore, you're probably going to go out there and operate rather than license. Okay, because any licensee has to basically pay you for what they're going to make, in a sense. So, this certainly has a lot to do with Uber and Lyft, who I'm out there sort of saying they can't scale without this. I mean, there just aren't enough drivers out there. You can do 1% of the trips out there. You can be a little blip, but you can't go out there and provide mobility to large sectors of the population and change the world. I mean, I guess whatever. And so therefore, and why would Waymo sell it to them? I just go out there and operate the damn thing. What the hell? Operating is trivial compared to where do you stand on that sort of spectrum?
Well, it's changed as I've talked to more people about it. Operations on the one hand might be trivial, but you're dealing with a lot of people, and can be expensive. And it can be drudgery in a different kind of way. I've been told by, and I mentioned this to you offline, but I'll say it here. I've been told by folks within the AV industry, once you go driverless, it takes, 2 to 3 people to make that happen, as opposed to keeping that human safety operator behind the wheel. The idea being that it takes more people to operate fully driverless, as opposed to, keeping that safety operator. And so that means cost, right? So there is an opportunity when you license tech. To me, the opportunity is more in the software as a services segment. So it's not just a one and done, here's the goose, as your analogy suggested, but more, here's the goose, but also you're going to have to pay me a user fee or sort of a software as a services type of fee to maintain the goose or feed the goose. And that is where I think there might be some opportunity for some AV companies. I'm really curious to see if Waymo is going to keep operating on its own. I mean, there was a comment that John Kravchuk made in an interview about it, 6 months ago. And it got me thinking that maybe Waymo wasn't going to be operating everything, but maybe I was reading into it. So companies like Neuro and on the delivery side, and Waymo on the delivery side too, but also on the shuttling people side, I think that they're right now still vetting and validating and verifying the tech. But a year from now, will we start seeing partnerships with third-party operators? I don't know. I mean, I would be guessing, but I do think that there is a path to revenue by doing that. But that's if it's a software as a services style business.
You had a couple of headlines this week too on Uber and Lyft as well.
Well, it was the earnings week, right?
Yeah,
So-
earnings week.
I think the big
What
news,
earnings?
I mean, the Uber story is interesting. They have, they're focused 100% on their core competency right now, which is ride hailing. They've, spun off the Uber Freight business. They offloaded Jump, which is their micromobility business, and they've completely doubled down on their delivery business, which is Uber Eats. And it's sort of a conflicting story. On the one hand, delivery has expanded exponentially, but it is not making money. It's losing money. And then ride hailing has constrained since, a year ago, year over year, but it's not losing money. So I'm very curious to see what Uber does in the months ahead. For Lyft and Uber, the big news is that, they got Prop 2 passed in California, which essentially was an existential risk to their company. They get to continue to classify gig economy workers as independent contractors. They don't have to completely redo everything. There are some agreements they make within that, which is some guaranteed wages and things like that. But, Uber's CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi. I always mess up his last name. I'm sorry. He has said that he is planning to advocate loudly for Prop 2 type laws all over the world. So I think we can expect more aggressive lobbying action and really to lock up that business model. Like, it is always hung over Uber and Lyft's head to keep those workers classified as independent contractors. So I think that's like the most interesting thing that happened this past month. We'll see what else Uber does in the weeks and months ahead. It'll be curious. What was your stance on Prop 2? Did you have a
Well, that's a very difficult issue because I guess, I think workers deserve to make a living wage and deserve to be able to feed their families, and to build a business on the back of people that aren't feeding their families is not the best thing in the world. One, that's on the one side. On the other side is that there are a lot of people who just, the gig economy allows them to do the one thing that they know how to do, which is drive. They don't know how to market. They don't know how to whatever, and do all the other things that you need to run a business. And they should be given an opportunity. I tell my students that the biggest gig economy is associated with the Apple's App Store. What has the App Store done? It's allowed someone who can just code to stay in their parents' basement and code, even though they can't market, they can't sell, they can't promote, they can't, but they can code. And here, all you have to do, and Apple gives them 30%. Okay. Now, whether or not any of that generates any revenues, no detail, but those are, to me, the ultimate gig workers, and they were maybe the first, not necessarily the first, and they can have their own time. They can do in the middle of the night, play video games the rest of the time, which if you're going to be an employee, there's a responsibility that comes for that. If you want to be able to get health care, if you want to be able to get vacation, if you want to be able to get sick leave, you've got to show up when the company wants you to show up, as opposed to doing it,
making your own hours is a big piece of it.
And
right?
Darn it, you pay for that. Princeton University doesn't give me health care. I pay for the damn thing. Okay? For the freedom that I have at being a professor, that I can basically be totally irresponsible, I pay for that. I pay for that, and I pay heavily for that. So to think that just because, you became an employee, you're not paying, of course you're paying for it. Okay. So you're and they're charging you. So in a sense, this has been the burden of them. Their burden is that the labor cost of providing mobility to an individual is non-trivial. It has been non-trivial since 1886 when Daimler first created the darn thing. It's been, otherwise, hey, the taxi company, the limousine companies would be providing we would have never bought cars. We would have been chauffeured around. Okay. We would have never gotten to the place where we are. That's expensive. Mm-hmm. Okay. And Uber and Lyft are going to face that expense. Yes, they have a little niche margin. They do. Uber and Lyft have to do more than just generate a profit. They have to generate a big profit. Because in fact, their capitalization to be able to be supported by profit, if in fact it's going to be supported by profit, it can't just be, oh yeah, we made a nickel. Yeah, I don't know. Talk to me.
I have a question for you though.
Sure.
What do you think Uber is going to do with its self-driving unit, Uber ATG? Do you think that has any promise, or that they're going to?
It is their only chance to become a company. My view.
Even though they're, pouring tons of money into it and it's super.
They have to. If you take whatever projection you want for, revenue, profitability for Uber or Lyft, you cannot achieve that if you have to pay for a driver. Mm-hmm. And whether or not you leave it on the backs of, somebody providing for themselves as a gig worker, or whether you pay them as an employee, to get enough people out there who are feeding their families, to move the people that you have to move, to make the amount of money you need to make to be whatever their stock valuation happens to be, which is enormously below what it was originally expected to be even then, is not achievable, my view. Not even close. The only way you can get there is to make it so that the labor cost associated with providing mobility goes to zero. So what you said in the beginning, yes, in the beginning, certainly it requires more people to do driverless. The opportunity, hopefully, the only opportunity is all this technology is going to let whatever few people you have now with very little market, that same number of people allows you to scale. Mm-hmm. Allows you to go 10x, 100x what you're doing now, 1,000x of what you're doing now. If there's not that opportunity, then hey, let's provide the limo drivette, male or female. I don't know.
Do you think though that for Uber specifically that they have, it's an expensive proposition, right? So they've got, ride hailing, they have the delivery piece.
They need it for both. The delivery piece makes money if you don't have to have a person there. If you can do it, maybe.
There's still the technological development, and that's obviously, expensive.
It's a fixed cost though. It's a one time. Mm-hmm. It's Moore's law. It gets cheaper and better as time goes on.
Right, but can it last that long?
They may not last. That's true. Yeah, absolutely. They may not be.
Do they have the money to actually see this through?
I think they do. I think they do. I think they collected enough money up front. They really do have a good team, even though they had the Elaine Herzberg thing, and right. They screwed up enormously, and they deserve to be whacked. All they got whacked for it. But they do have good people there. They have done some. They know what they need to do with the amount of things that they've tried to do, both in Pittsburgh and San Francisco, where they try, and they certainly know. They must know that their business is fundamentally dependent on them being able to achieve that themselves and not have to pay somebody else, not only for that goose, but it's golden eggs. Because if they develop the goose, then they have the goose. They get it for the goose, not the eggs. I don't know. That's just the way I want. Sorry about that. I don't know.
Do you see Lyft in the same category, or do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Both of them. And
the big question is whether they have the
and Via too, and all the others.
Right. Yeah.
Via can do a little ditty here, a little there, but it's not
Right.
scale.
The big question for Lyft and Uber, I think, is going to be if they have the well, first of all, the internal commitment at the executive level to see this through, and are comfortable with the amount of money that they're going to have to put towards this to actually bring it to market. Because I don't the impression I get is that Uber ATG isn't necessarily like particularly close to like suddenly deploying, a bunch of robo taxis. They're still like every other company, with maybe the exception of Waymo, really are in the testing phase, right? So there has to be a commitment at the executive level, and or some sort of situation where you're able to, partner with other companies and keep costs lower or share costs. I mean, they have the partnership with Toyota, or the investment from Toyota, which is interesting. But yeah, I'm curious to see
The investment from Toyota is interesting, and at some point, one would think the most profitable real automaker, unless we want to consider Tesla to be a real automaker, but we won't go there. But whatever, is Toyota, and Toyota certainly has been, they were sort of big in this, and they've certainly fallen. I mean, Lane Hersberg caused them to tuck their tail in between their legs and almost disappear. But they've got to be doing things internally, and at some point they have to be coming out. They just don't need to tell us. They get no benefit out of telling us what benefit. They're not out there trying to get SoftBank to give them a bunch of money. I guess not. I don't know. Whatever.
Well, SoftBank already gave them a bunch of money, so they don't need
maybe they don't need any more, right? So
and
Lyft
has partnerships too. So
Lyft has partner Aptiv and so on, and they're out there, and I guess they went back into Las Vegas, didn't they? And started, operating again in Las Vegas. So they're, I don't know. I just why didn't Yellow Cab do this in 1930? If in fact you can do it with a person, okay?
Right.
If you can
we'll
do
go back in time and ask the folks at
Kirsten, I know you've got to run, but before you go, do you have any thoughts on what the new administration might mean in terms of all of this technology, the new mobility? Biden is bringing in a lot of Silicon Valley people, I suppose, into his policy expert panel.
Yeah, it'll be I'm very, very interested to see how a few of his policies, or what I think might be his policies, not the specifics, but he has an interesting personal background where he absolutely was impacted by, a car crash taking
absolutely and
he has, on the other hand, he's a huge Amtrak user, that's well documented. He seems to be more interested in pursuing climate change policy and in and around that. At the same time, he has an extreme love for Corvettes. And so I think that he might reflect how a lot of people feel, which is, you want to see some efficient, public transit, but you still you don't want to give up a car, right? So I don't really know how this is going to play out, because I've been looking for cues and sort of how the transition team and things like that. I think what a lot of AV companies are going to be paying attention to is, who is tapped ultimately for those key positions, because right now, with some of the AV guidelines out there that have been developed in the last couple of years, it has been more friendly to AV companies, which is kind of a little bit more of guidelines hands-off approach. So is it going to be more regulations, or is that going to continue on that track of more, voluntary guideline sort of or philosophy? I that's the one piece I don't know. I have no indication of how Biden feels about that specific area on AVs. On the one hand, maybe he'll see the safety benefits and be a big champion of it. And, or on the other hand, you know, there's historically been a lot of support for unions, and if there's concern about loss of jobs or something, I really don't know where he and his administration would fall on that piece. But we kind of know how he feels about public transit. There's also the question, of course, of the rest of the, you know, Congress and its willingness to do anything about, you know, public transit or Amtrak, which has struggled for years, and you know, the concept of high-speed rail. You know, anyone who's traveled outside the United States knows what it could potentially be, but it's whether there's like a commitment, you know, within the administration or the public at all for something of that scale, because it's expensive. Do you have any predictions?
Well, I have no, I'm the same way. I'm certainly looking. I'm trying, not that I can look as well as you can look, but I certainly have been looking. To me, the missed opportunity with all this is to look at this as really the provision of mobility to people who need and can use the mobility. This is the new mass transit mode. This allows mass transit to serve more than 4% of the trips, which is what it serves now. It could allow it to serve 10% of the trips, 15% of the trips, provide mobility to the folks who could really have their lives improved, as opposed to just being another way to get from A to B, that at least some people are saying. And that's what has not been promoted up to this point. And that's what bothers me about Waymo just being in Chandler. I want Waymo to come to Trenton, and to come to the cities like Trenton, where people really do need the mobility, and there's nothing on the shelf right now that can provide them that mobility affordably that this can. This can do it affordably. Why? Because it takes the labor charge out of it. And that doesn't mean that it unemploys anybody. In fact, you end up employing more people. So in the delivery piece, you improve the quality of life of the people that work there. And in this thing, you just improve your market share. So great. Who do you unemploy? You unemploy me. You unemploy you. We've been doing this mobility thing, chauffeuring our kids around, chauffeuring our friends around, chauffeuring ourselves around for free. We get, this thing allows us to and that aspect of it is not pronounced in Washington, not the way it should be. This is a great opportunity if we can get this darn thing to work. Okay, well, it can't crash. It can't crash. It's got to be. Safety is a floor. It's a floor here, and we've got to make sure that everybody's safe, and it's not what we should be competing on. That's what we should cooperate on, and all those various things. I don't know. That's just, but anyway, we want your views, darn it, because you're the expert out here. I'm just a goofy academic, whatever.
Yeah, this is just the views of an academic. Well, no, but I mean, I think it resonates with a lot of people. So yeah. I want to hear what you think too.
and if it is looked at from that perspective by the Biden administration, you can certainly envision him getting behind it. We know he's behind an expansion of EV. EV charging.
And this allows EVs. This makes it easier for EVs. It does all that thing. It takes the range issue and the hell out of the damn question with EVs and so on. I mean, and I think he will go this way. It was interesting to see the Obama administration actually move in this direction at the end. Okay, to begin to see it, and in the Trump administration, to its great, we should give it kudos for this. I mean, they allowed it to continue. They didn't squash it. They didn't go out there, hey, we know better, damn it, we're going to tell you what the hell to do. I mean, we don't know. We're still at the very beginning here. We're still at the very, very beginning. Anyway, I don't know. Whatever.
We'll have to check back in.
We have to check back in, and I want you involved in the summit. It's great having you out there. I mean, it's great having you out there, doing all the reporting you're doing, and you do a great job with it. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for taking the time with us, Kirsten.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, Kirsten was great, Alan, to have with us.
Oh,
Let's
absolutely fantastic. I mean, she spends all day doing this, although I spend all day doing this too, but she has better access. In here in the Princeton bubble, you don't get to see much, whatever.
Well, from the Smart Driving Car newsletter, Alan, our friend Ken Pyle sent along a story on California beginning a new phase of its road charge demonstration project with support from a federal surface transportation funding alternative grant. California will test how road charge can work with 4 technologies: usage-based insurance, ride sharing, electric vehicle charging stations, pay at the pump systems, and autonomous vehicles. And I think you point out in the newsletter, Alan, that New Jersey's looking at something similar.
Yeah, well, everybody's looking and wondering about how we're going to pay for the infrastructure, whether it's driverless or us driving it. We need the roadway system. We need that surface, and we need the control systems on there and the bridges and all those kinds of things, and they have to get paid for some way. We've had this beautiful way of paying for it up to now, which is we charge the wholesale part of gasoline a certain amount and make them pay at the wholesale level, and they then have to force it down to then the retail level to collect it back in the form of gas tax. And if you look, to me, every time I look at it, what a great way to collect money is. You only have to collect it from a few wholesalers that then have to do the work to collect it from the infinite number of retail entities or consumers out there, and to do it really based on proportionally on how much you use. And if you happen to have a gas guzzler, guess what? You use more and you pay more. Now, whether or not you really pay sufficiently more than you should and all that stuff, but at least you pay more.
But then EVs come along.
But then
electric vehicles.
EVs come along, and then you paint yourself into a corner, and you say, I need to promote these things for all these very good reasons. You want to promote them. And one of the ways that you promote them is basically you don't charge them any use charges for using this surface. And so, that's where the problem is. Now you got to say, well, I'm not even going to provide you the incentives anymore, and I'm going to start charging you. It's tough to get you out of that painted corner that you've put yourself into. Okay, so you have to wait for the paint to dry, I guess. I don't know. So this is, waiting for the paint to dry. But this is tough. This is a real question, and how you're going to want to do it. And it should be proportional to the amount that you use. Or maybe the end activities that get supported by this, the attractions that then allow people to get to those attractions. Maybe that should be the thing that I keep going back to the elevator analogy. If I build a tall building, if I want to charge rent for the 14th floor, I've got to put in the mobility system. I may need to put a fare box on that mobility system, but I don't know, or there maybe to go to the observatory at the top of the World Trade Center, you need to put in a credit card. I don't know, whatever. But in most of them, it's provided by the entity that is given accessibility so that they can do whatever they need to do with the space that the mobility is serving.
Couple of other stories.
Do that? Who knows? Right. I mean, that's a whole lecture. I mean, whatever. Never mind.
Well, we got to talk about the elevator, so I'm happy.
Yeah.
Reuters is reporting, Alan, that Honda this week said it will be the first to mass produce level 3 autonomous cars. You had a pretty strong reaction in the news.
Well, I sort of did it with Kirsten. I mean, I guess they're going the Elon route and suggesting they have something they don't really have. Again, if you want to talk about level 3, the way it's written by the SAE, which of course I don't like, I don't even think a level 3 even exists, says that I can go in and while I'm going down in some operational design domain, I don't care what it is, Honda says in heavy traffic or something, I don't know, whatever they say, I can just be on my phone and I can play my games and I don't need to pay attention. It's going to drive for me.
Again, it's that question of liability. Are they willing
Hey,
to be responsible, right?
To me, hey, if Honda comes out and says this, we know that it works, okay? As you think about turning it on, we're not going to let you turn it on unless it really works. And we're going to make sure we get you to throw your phone down and take over if we think it's not going to work, so that nothing happens from the time that you want to do it to the time that you have to be back doing it. And it works. And we are so sure that we're going to accept the responsibility if, I don't know, a meteorite hits you, whatever happens during that period. Then I can feel comfortable that Honda has sold me something that they in fact are standing behind and has given me for whatever that's telling me that in fact it's supposed to be able to do. They haven't done that. Elon hasn't done that. Looks to me like Waymo has done it with Waymo 1 in the operational design domain that they have wherever they happen to have that operational design domain, and they know those vehicles, they know where the person is, where it's going, they know that it can operate, and they're out there and they're saying,
but they're not selling it to you. They're letting you ride.
Saying,
right.
Yeah, no, they're selling me the ride. I have to pay for it.
Exactly. But
of
not
course
the vehicle.
Selling it. Well,
so that's the difference. That's the difference here.
Well, I mean, I don't care. Give me the ride.
Right.
Sell me the vehicle.
Right.
I mean, you
don't think, want the vehicle. Right.
Well, I'm not going to want the vehicle if I can't drive it. Why should I want it? I assume Waymo 1's good enough and whatever to do it more efficiently and whatever, and we'll maintain it. I mean, I can't maintain a thing. Right. Okay, I can't even comb my hair. Oh, there is some.
Alan, this should be near and dear to your heart. Electrek has reported this week that Tesla is the #1 most attractive company for engineering students. And they call that a massive advantage, of course, if that's true.
Yeah. I mean, they get to choose good people. How do you build a company? You got to have good people. I mean, this is fundamental. I mean, if you look at the car companies, I mean, I don't want to name the car company, but there is an auto manufacturer in the United States who recruited at Princeton who could basically almost never get anybody to go to work there. And it's kind of a shame. Some people, hey, Princeton student, whatever. I mean, seriously, if you have access to good people and you're going to hire this many, and wow. How you define wow and so on makes a difference. I think, ethics and so on and all is really important, all that, not just being able to, do proofs and theorems and write code and all the other good things. But if they're knocking on the door and you get to choose as opposed to, oh man, I need a body, it's fundamental, I think.
Right. Well, you've got the planning continuing. You've talked about it a little bit already here for the Smart Driving Car Summit. It's going to be spread out over a period of weeks, actually months.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the year.
And I think, again, we'd like to hear from some of our audience out here as to whether or not they think it's a good idea. But the idea is that, we're going to ask you to come Thursdays, for about an hour and a half. It's going to but we hope that in order to be able to get not only some amount of information brought out, but to get engagement as much as we can from the audience back. And so it's going to be worth watching live, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to go on YouTube and just watch, something. I think it's important that, what's important in conferences and so on is the opportunity to engage, the opportunity to take it, in a couple of little bit other directions. And this is what we're going to attempt to do. So we're going to get started on December 10th. I'm going to lay out basically where I hope we can go. There is a purpose behind all this. I mean, part of the purpose behind all this is to really discuss this opportunity to provide not only safety on the one hand in providing help to folks who continue to drive, so that in fact, if they happen to go astray a little bit, they don't end up having to crash, on the one hand, and on the other hand, provide mobility to the folks who really would like to have affordable, high quality mobility offered to them, and how we do that and end up providing some of that at the end. So that's really those are the two pieces. I think those are the two big markets here. Of course, providing mobility for packages is the same as providing mobility. I'm pretty much of a package lug myself. Throw me in the back. I'm just good.
Well, important stuff, and we're going to look forward to it. People can go to smartdrivingcar.com for the latest info on what's coming up. We also want to mention the Autonomous Vehicle Policy Forum. They've got a series of discussions coming up next week, I think. And you've got a link in the newsletter to register for that.
Right. And Salika Talbot, we just did a little session in my class with her, and she's really good. And she's putting on a summit-like thing for 2 days next week, and we have a registration link for that. Invite people to take a look at that.
And if people want to find Kirsten's work, she was really terrific to have as a guest.
Oh, fantastic.
Head to techcrunch.com for that. We want to thank our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol again for the ETF is MOTO, and you find more information at motoetf.com. We are at smartdrivingcar.com, also on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Spreaker, SoundCloud, a whole lot more on Amazon. Now you can find us, including Audible under podcasts. You can ask your smart speaker to play us. You can find my tech reports at techstination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alan Kornhauser. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and please stay safe.
Thank you for being here with us.